Okay, good morning, everyone. Welcome to the 2020 Women on Boards Virtual Summit hosted by How Women Lead. We set a goal that 20% of the Russell 3000 directors would be women, and that is a goal that I'm happy to report has been exceeded. Last year, we exceeded that goal, and so today, of course, we're going to set a new goal and get a progress update. Now, this event this morning is happening in 33 cities across the country. It is undeniable. Change is happening. How Women Lead is at the center of the movement to disrupt antiquated, unequal systems by propelling you, kick-ass women, into even greater leadership roles. Our network of 13,000 women leaders are at the top of their game, and they have partnered to change laws like SB 826, which now requires corporate board diversity. Together, we testified, we wrote letters, and we advocated, and it worked. 6 states have so far replicated this legislation, and now we need to make sure that every board finds great women to fill those critical seats once and for all. Now, to that end, How Women Lead has created 25 events so that you can up your game no matter where you are in your journey. We have programs for those just starting to learn about the path and preparation. We have deeply technical sessions so you can lead committees and serve on the board with confidence. And we have hot topics like getting a venture board seat, the board chair role, and the impact of race in the boardroom. How Women Lead uniquely engages you and your leadership to make a week like this possible. Now, there is a role for you with How Women Lead. We only ask that you raise your hand. Let us know the impact that you want to have and also what you need. In the chat, there is a chat for all y'all. There is a link to be in the inner circle, and you definitely want to be the first one called, the designers of the HWL future. It is great for your brand, your network, and your soul. Now, I want to thank the chairs of this event, and I am happy now to turn it over to one of these leaders, event chair, who put this whole thing together, Cindy Worthington, Senior Vice President for Wells Fargo Bank. Cindy, good morning.
Thank you, Vicki. Great to see everybody here, and thanks for joining us. I first want to acknowledge our sponsor for this morning. Thank you to Accenture. And want to thank our leadership committee this week. These are the visionary and committed leaders, the first movers who we all owe a debt of gratitude. Most of you were invited here today by your leadership committee. Please thank them for supporting you to up your game. Nearly 200 women corporate directors have generously offered to share their experience and meet with you this week. 40 of them will be with you in the breakout sessions right after this opening. Let's thank them virtually. Show us your love and put your arms in the air. All right, gotta get this party started. All right, many of you have bruises from breaking that glass ceiling. Because of you and your discipline and hard work, courage and fortitude, you proved that your leadership results in better financial returns. 26% better returns, actually. These women directors are the first people approached for a new board opportunity, and when they can't take that seat, they can refer you. Today and throughout this week, we are creating intimate spaces for you to meet board directors and build relationships so you can get that referral. All right, Vicki, take it away.
All righty, give me one sec. Forgive me, it's hard to start and stop our video. Here we go, there I am, all righty. Thank you so much, Cindy, and everyone, she is a very critical connector to know, so do make sure that you connect with Cindy. All right, let's talk a little bit about how this morning is going to go. We're gonna get up to speed on the trends. We're gonna unveil the companies who are winning in board diversity. And today we brought together the leaders that are bucking tradition and bringing innovation into the boardroom at the country's top companies. You'll meet the youngest women board directors of color in the US and a CEO who has achieved boardroom gender diversity in just a few years. Then we're going to go into breakouts with women directors at approximately 9:15. You should have a separate Zoom link for that session. And if you don't have it, there are 2 things that you can do. Ask the person who invited you today, or send a private chat or email to Alice Meyerhoff or Nicole Stiles from the team. We don't want to miss out on that. All right, we're going to leave each of us today with some action steps to take. You were sent a worksheet that looks like this. There's a slide, and please read that and fill it out. It has something for everyone. Now, research tells us culture is set within the first 30 people in companies. One of the things I love most is that our CEO, Julie, sets a culture where women are actively supporting and promoting each other. How Women Lead wants to change the way that we interact with each other. And we invite you to consider signing on to this new culture. That starts with being fierce advocates for each other. No mean girl behavior, so actively work to build each other up. Say yes to helping and connecting with each other, not filtering your support, which is actually a way that women need to change. If a woman asks for an introduction, make your first reaction yes. Men, ladies, they're a lot better at this than women are. Reinforce another woman's voice. When she speaks up and you can tell she isn't being heard, be her echo chamber and ensure that she gets credit. And get out there, be unabashedly visible. The old ways of women being invisible are over. There's nothing indelicate about standing in your power and owning your voice. Our daughters are watching you. They take their cues of confidence and leadership from you. So when you need a boost of confidence, think of all those girls and all those young women who are watching one of our leaders today, Kamala Harris, and pause and reflect and think, what would they say about you? How do you inspire them? And now, a friend to most of us and the visionary leader who gives us a beacon of hope and community, general partner for our venture, How Women Invest, director of our search practice, Board Leaders, and our CEO here at How Women Lead, Julie Castro-Abrams. Good morning, Julie.
Good morning. We did it, you guys. We led change and we made it happen. And this ball is rolling fast. I can't think of a better place to gather on the heels of the election of our very own Kamala Harris, the first woman, first Black and South Asian Vice President of the United States, daughter of immigrants who looks like San Francisco. She's ours, and she shows us it's time for us to take our rightful place as leaders. So are you ready? You may be wondering if there's a path for you. You may be feeling that pesky imposter syndrome. Who are you to think that you're enough? Are you standing in the kickball line hoping to get picked? Ultimately, you probably want to know that the risk is worth it, that you putting your time and yourself out there is worth the investment. I want you to know there's a pathway and there are women who came before you and look like you, whose career pathways are similar. If a board seat isn't right for you today, I want you to think about how to augment your career for 10 years from now. All right, everyone, I have a little secret to share with you. There are people on boards today with less experience and less insight than you have. I promise you. What's in it for you and for all of us? Well, I'm here to tell you we need you. We need your leadership, your expertise, your perspective. We need your voice when critical decisions are being made. And now, because of our hard work, everyone knows it. So here are the things you need to know. There is not a pipeline problem. There is a network problem. Boards are largely made up of white men over 6 feet tall. Most of them were CEOs at some point, but for many, it's been a long time. So when 85% of board searches are through word of mouth, who do you think they suggest? The white men over 60 who they know. Listen, most of your network probably looks a lot like you. That's actually very much a normal human condition. So we need to help these tall, older white gentlemen out. Here are the suggestions I have after working with the nation's most influential leaders in the space. I'm on the governor's task force around this. 1, solve the network problem. Some people say they can't find women with the right qualifications. I've done searches for public companies that couldn't find a woman, even after they hired a search firm. And we find them 10 candidates that they say they could replace their entire board with. I feel confident in saying that every open board seat in this country can be filled by a woman of color, and it will make those boards better. All right, 2, shift the demand side by creating legislation and also by asset management firm requirements for 2 women on boards, and companies like Goldman Sachs, who came out and required at least 1 woman on the board to take a company public. We're helping people get over their bias maybe their laziness or lack of effort. Once there are 3 women and people of color on those boards, it shifts the way they function. The network of those leaders will be activated, and we are never going to go back. All right, 3, shift the composition of skills and experience. Today, you will hear from the youngest women of color public company directors in the US. Yay! Only one of them is a CEO. In the past, companies thought they wanted a board of all experienced CEOs. And as a CEO with a board, I understand that. You want people who've walked the path you're walking. But this is the thing, you don't need your whole board to look like that. And it's shifting. The influencing factors include demand for cybersecurity, digital transformation, focus on culture, stakeholder accountability. We have shareholder activists demanding change and literally suing boards when they are not managing against these critical governing issues. Boards are moving to have better balance of diversity and expertise. A few previous or current CEOs are not enough. Younger directors, operators who are on top of current trends, those who are in a variety of disciplines are becoming more and more in demand. This assists women because we often have many of the skills now in demand, and the system bias has kept us out of the CEO roles. So remember, most CEOs in the US are white men over 6 feet tall. That is not a definition of merit, skill, or potential success. All right, 4, finally. Transparency and disclosure combined result in trust. We are in an era of visibility. Bad CEO behavior in the back of an Uber or at a restaurant can tank your career. Show me the boardroom is a new mantra from investors, clients, and employees, and we must be ready. In order to break down the barriers getting you into the right boardroom, How Women Lead is working across the system. So this is what we're doing, and you're invited to play in the sandbox. Together with 2020 Women on Boards, we're working as national and statewide leaders, changing laws and norms. We set targets for companies to meet. They're recognized when they do well, and we make it easy for them to move forward. Let's advance those slides. We provide training for you to be better board members, and we create intimate connections and help you build relationships. And finally, we do board searches. We can get you potential board opportunity. Every morning this week, we're sending out board announcements. We want you to respond to those opportunities. And definitely, if your company board is looking to fill a board seat, contact us. We will help you. So this is the thing. This is where you come into play. Your time is now. It's time for you to step up into your leadership. The doors are being swung wide open. Corporate performance is at stake, and so are our very lives. Recalls happen 3 times faster when there's gender diversity on boards. 3 times faster. How Women Lead is committed to keeping us honest, to pushing the envelope, partnering with companies and leaders who move the needle, and most importantly, supporting you on making the change from the inside out. We're all counting on you to be unabashedly visible, to say yes to making connections, amplifying her voice, and to be fierce champions for each other. We're at a tipping point. Are you going to step up? For all of us, for our daughters and our sons, let's make a better world.
All right, Julie, thank you so much. That was a really inspiring talk to get us ready to go. Thank you for leading. All right, we're now going to get to see the data. It's hot off the press about board diversity in California and in the nation. Lee Wasson, BNY Mellon, is one of our event chairs, and she's going to help take us through these very important numbers. Hi, Lee.
Hi, Vicki. Thank you so much. California is leading the country on board diversity, thanks in part to this amazing network. Why is this important? Because research from around the globe shows that gender diversity at the executive and board levels increases profitability, stability, and innovation, and contributes to building a more inclusive workplace. Boards are increasingly called upon to respond to external economic and social forces. The best boards simultaneously provide strategic insight and hold management accountable. Diverse teams make the best decisions. In fact, one data point that product recalls are 3 times faster when you have a diverse board. And of large cap companies, those with diverse directors outperformed all male boards by, get this, 26%. And as Vicki shared, together in community, we testified and wrote letters, and we helped pass the California SB 826. And our CEO, Julie, who you just heard from, serves on the California Partners Project to oversee the implementation in California. And just 2 months ago, California passed AB 979, requiring ethnic and other diversity on boards. Now, this was a hard-won fought and is critical given the abysmal representation of ethnic minorities, most striking with a population of 40% Latinos, but only 13% of California boards have a Latino and only 1% Latinas. In California, we went from lagging to leading. We set out to meet 20% by 2020, and we have exceeded that goal, and today we are at 24.7%. Do you think this is good enough? I don't. Our next step is parity. In 2019, the first year where the legislation took hold, we doubled the number of women added to boards, and this year we expect similar expansion. This is only a partial year view, which is the good news. 183 companies, 28.2%, already meet the law's gender requirements for end of year 2021. So here we come. Since 2018, the number of California public companies with all male boards has decreased from 29% to 2.3%. Millennials and Gen Z dominate our workforce and are looking for purpose-driven careers at companies that prioritize diversity and innovation. Companies will have to stay committed to building diversity from the board level down if they want to stay competitive and attract top talent. Have any of you heard that the same women are getting new board seats? Well, the governor's report suggests we are primarily adding new individual women directors. So as Julie said, it's time to step up and get on board. In October, 44 women identified as women of color, with 34 identifying as African American. This is a critical measurement as diversity in business leadership is at the forefront of leadership practices in 2020. The large percentage of women of color appointed to public boards is accompanied by an increase in the number of women of color appointed to public boards in the Russell 3000 Index. For comparison, in January 2020, no woman appointed to boards of public companies in the Russell 2000 Index identified as women of color, while in October, that number had gone to 30. And 22% of women appointed were appointed to boards of public companies in the healthcare sector, and 17.6% of women appointed were appointed to the board of public companies in the tech sector. So 2 really hot, important sectors. Among the 25 states in the US that have more than 20 companies on the Russell 3000, all but 2, Florida and Utah, exceeded the 20% goal for women on their boards this year. The states that achieved more than 20% for the first time are Alabama, Colorado, Indiana, Pennsylvania, Tennessee, and Texas. So here comes the momentum. Despite all the progress, today in California, there are 36 companies out of 511 with gender balanced boards and 163 nationwide, which means only 5% are gender balanced. So we have our work cut out for us. And with this as our background, we are honored to unveil that our new goal is parity. We will track and inspire and create together a successful movement.
Thank you, Lee. While most of the data you will see today is about public board composition, private company boards have thousands of board seats available. And for many of you, they are the first step. And I would say, given what Vicki said about culture being set early, we must take it seriously. Today, we have a problem in venture. 90% of venture capital decision makers are men. They take the first board seats when they invest. So ladies, here's your opportunity. 30% of men who are accredited investors are investing in venture. Only 5% of women are. We can change that right now, this morning. You can invest and ask for a board seat. If you need to build your confidence, we have angel investing training. If you want to start by investing with others who are experts, talk to me about joining our venture fund. We're about to close a $10 million fund investing in women founders, but there are a few slots, and I can refer you to other funds. If you invest $100,000 directly in a company, depending on the stage, you can ask for a board seat. You may need to settle for being a board observer or an advisor, but it's a start.
Okay, start in, oh. I'm sorry, did you have something more to say, Christina? I didn't mean to cut you off there. That was Christina. Okay, that was Christina Bowie, the CRO at Kranz Consulting, and that was interesting, a lot to unpack right there. We're gonna now meet the companies that we're talking about. So please, let's welcome event chair, China practice co-leader of Moss Adams. It is Beverly Bien up next. Hi, Beverly.
Hi, Vicki. Thank you so much. It is my pleasure to unveil the 2020 Public Company Honor Roll. These public companies have over 20% women on their boards. Many of these companies are national leaders who have had good board diversity and were in fact those companies that showed us all that diversity results in better performance, lower risk, and responsiveness to a crisis in a year like this one. You want to work at these companies. This isn't the whole story, of course. These are just public companies. Private companies, venture-backed companies are not listed here. That must be our next area of focus.
Just jinxed myself. We were talking about how things are flowing well, and I've finally got my technical stuff situated. And of course, I biffed it. Sorry, Beverly, thank you so much. We do have a lot to be proud of in California. And now to the fun part. We're gonna do the lightning talks. We have 3 of the nation's youngest public company board directors, all women of color, and a leading CEO who are now going to do a lightning round of content. Then we're gonna have a panel to dig deeper and ask some questions. So please lean in. This is the part I think y'all have been waiting for. I'm gonna turn it over first to Susan Lee for her lightning talk. Welcome, Susan.
Hi, good morning. Thank you all for the opportunity to be here. I'm honored to be invited. And I thought I would open by just sharing a little of what I feel like has been one of the most consistent learning experiences of my career so far, and frankly, a lesson that I continue to learn, whether it's at Facebook where I work or Alaska Air Group where I serve on the board. And it's very much about learning to embrace the discomfort of new challenges and figuring out how to find my voice. So when I joined Facebook over 12 years ago, it was about 400 people. And I went from being an analyst in a highly structured investment banking program to being the fourth person on a finance team that was doing everything for a fledgling company: revenue forecasting, sales planning, headcount, budgets, etc.
Susan, I'm so sorry to interrupt you. Could we get you to turn on the video so we can see you? What you're saying is riveting, but I think we just want to get your video turned on. In the upper right-hand corner, there's 3 little dots. If you hover above your square.
Sorry about that. For some reason, Zoom is actually not letting me turn on my video. I am clicking on this and nothing is happening.
Let's see.
Sorry.
No problem at all. I thought you were just trying to make me look better by having a little bit of a technical issue on your side. So I appreciate that. So in the little upper corner, like in your box, if you hover where you, right next to where you unmuted, if you, do you see the 3 dots?
Yep, it's telling me Zoom is unable to detect a camera. So I apologize.
Oh,
no. I'm wondering.
No problem. Let's just keep going. You're so fabulous, Susan. This is great info.
Why don't I finish and then I will fix my camera issue for the panel. Would that work?
Perfect.
Okay, sorry about that. Okay, so I was talking about joining Facebook, and I don't know how many of you have worked in banking, but while that is a grueling job, it's also a job that comes with a lot of training. And starting at Facebook was basically beyond being thrown in the deep end. So every new thing I was asked to work on was not only completely new to me, but also pretty much new for the company. And my manager, very understandably, was also underwater and didn't have time to teach me. And so if you talk about imposter syndrome, which I know Julie mentioned earlier, I for sure felt it. That first year was crazy challenging. I felt like I was constantly getting everything done to the minimum passable level before we had to move on to the next thing. And I was getting a lot of constructive feedback. Every week, my manager would pull me aside to tell me where I could do better. And it was really uncomfortable. I bet a lot of people here know what it feels to be very organized and type A and have a plan for how things are going to go. And this was so far from it. But over the course of the next year, besides having more people join the team to share the work, one of those projects that I ended up working on became an area that I was uniquely interested in and suited to, which in this case was modeling an ads auction and using that to build a forecast for our revenue trajectory. And that became an area for me to really own and to be a clear expert and add value. And it was a real turning point for me in finding my place at Facebook. And when I joined the Alaska board 2 years ago, I was pretty quick to feel that same sense of being thrown in the deep end. I'm, in finance, I work for a tech company. I don't know very much about airlines. And as I began onboarding with a management team that was really exceptionally warm and welcoming, I began learning, about aircraft, airports, network planning, loyalty programs, airline alliances, all new to me. And I certainly felt that same strong sense of, gosh, what am I doing here? And in that ensuing year, aside from learning a lot about a fascinating industry, I began to find that I had ideas that transplanted my perspective from seeing consumer experiences being designed through the lens of tech products to the way that an airline might think about designing consumer experiences in a world that is barreling towards digital technology at a faster rate every day. And in fact, over the last year, Alaska has established a board level innovation committee on which I now serve, and that has helped me find my voice in a place where I feel like I can uniquely contribute. So I think so much of my career and board experience has involved learning to take that feeling of being really uncomfortable when you feel totally new and unprepared and frankly inadequate, and meeting that feeling as a challenge to uniquely, to embrace and overcome and find for me how I can uniquely contribute, which has often turned out to be something that I wouldn't have envisioned at the outset. So, that brings us, of course, to 2020, which has been a year of enormous uncertainty and challenge. And I don't think discomfort is even the right word. It's so much bigger than that. It's been a year of struggle for so many people and so many industries, including airlines. And whether it's managing the personal health risks, the industry-wide impact of a major economic shock, the adjustment to a remote workplace, managing childcare. I have a kindergartner, and I would say virtual Zoom kindergarten was not a big success. I have to say that this is a year that I know is challenging everyone, and especially working moms, to think about how to meet the needs of this new and I hope temporary normal. And I know some of those topics are coming up for more discussion later. So thank you again for having me. I'm really looking forward to today's conversation. Thanks for bearing with the tech challenges, and I will try to fix those now.
Thank you so much, Susan. And tech challenges is sort of the order of the year, right? 2020. All right, I think we're going to turn it over to Dan for 4 minutes on your lightning talk. Dan Springer, please join us.
Hey there. Coming through okay?
Think we need your video on too. We do see your picture, a slide of you.
Yeah, I may be having the same issue. It says my video is on.
Your video's on. Not sure why. Yeah, everyone can see your video.
Okay, good. Thank you. All right, so my lightning round is actually going to be a story, a quick transformation story around how boards can be transformed, and it doesn't have to be that difficult. I think a lot of times people present it as it's so difficult to change an undiversified board to one that's more diversified. I joined DocuSign a little over 3 years ago. We had a 12-member board as a private company, which is quite prodigious. It was 11 old white guys and Mary Meeker. And when I joined, or just before I joined, Mary told me she was going to need to transition off. So I clearly had a large challenge. In addition, it was a highly dysfunctional board, primarily because it was non-collaborative. And so that was the sort of a second challenge we had. But the answer on how to solve that problem is you need to make a plan. Just like every other business task we all have to take on, you make a plan. I realized what I needed to have is a vision of what I wanted. I wanted to have about 8 to 10 board members, and I needed some additional perspectives. I needed some youth on my board. I needed certain technical skills like financial capability and product expertise. I needed more gender and racial diversity, obviously. And to do all that, I needed to exit all but 2 of the board members that I had. And when you try to drive that kind of change, the really key thing to do is upfront, tell everyone what you're doing, get them all to buy into the concept of what you really want your new board to look like in a macro standpoint. And then you can have those tough individual chats explaining to people sort of one by one that they're going to need to transition off. You need to take enough time so it's not abrupt and people don't fight it. You need to sort of get buy-in each step of the way that the change is going to happen. And the last thing I'd say is focus on the inputs. Don't make sort of demographic checkboxes, because then people push back and feel that there's sort of a discrimination against these poor old white men who I obviously am one myself. Last thing on my plan was to get a partner. And so I brought in from my network, Maggie Wilderotter. I asked her to join the board, and I told her I was going to ask her to become the chair of the board in a few quarters after she got her feet wet. She's been a fantastic partner for me. Leveraging her network and my network, we've been able to find fantastic board members to drive more of that distribution we wanted. And the other thing I would lastly say on it is you need to kind of surgically attack each of those roles. You're not just adding board members. There's an overall board, but people have certain expertise and capabilities. So I went out and got Cynthia Gaylord to be our audit committee chair. Then I needed a person that had some youth and some product and engineering experience, and brought on Inhi Cho Su. For both of them, this was their first public board. And actually, really, it was their first board experience at all. A lot of people think that's risky. I don't think it's risky. You just need to think about people having those capabilities and qualifications so everyone understands what you're asking them to do, and it makes a lot of sense. Unfortunately, my management team was also all white men when I joined. So I had a diversification challenge there. So I took Cynthia off our board later and asked her to become the CFO. So I kind of hurt myself on the board side in order to help with the management team diversity challenge. But it's great because we found Teresa Briggs to come in and be the audit committee chair. So if you take that sort of attacking individual roles, looking for those specific pieces that you need to make the board have the full capability that you need, you can drive this kind of change. Today we have 8 outside directors. 3 of them are women, 3 are people of color. I feel satisfied with that diversity. I'm sure many people in this room could say you could even do better, and of course they'd be right. But we've gotten to a place that we now have a high functioning board, and we have the ability to continue to add diversity as well as additional skill sets to the board. So my core message to you is it's not that hard. People look at the challenge and say, whether it's a talent pipeline excuse that of course is bullshit, but the people have reasons they come up and say it's difficult. And the core reason it is difficult is because they didn't develop a plan and a vision for how they want to get to where they want to go. Thank you so much for having me.
Dan, nice. That was really interesting. I love how you said you had to exit some people. off of your board. That's a funny concept.
Gotta make
and
room. Gotta make room.
Yeah. Okay, let's turn it over now to Clara Shih for 4 minutes. Clara, welcome, hello, good morning, and take it away. Wait, unmute yourself.
I'm on mute. So classic. Thank you, Vicki, and good morning, ladies. It's an honor and a delight to be with all of you this morning. I'll just share a bit about my story and what I've learned about board leadership in the last 9 years. So just for some context, I was 29 when I was recruited to join the Starbucks board in 2011. And I was at the time in year 2 of having started my tech company, Hearsay Systems, and being the CEO. And I had my board, it's at Hearsay, but it was a private company board that consisted of my VC investors. And to be really honest, I didn't actually know what public company boards even do. And so I got the call from the recruiter, and I remember even having to Google who she was just to make sure that it was a legit call. And then I went through that year-long process, and it's just really incredible over the last 10 years, just learning about the importance of having people like us in that boardroom for key decisions. And what I really believe, after having served on the board now, and I'm in my 9th year, about to enter the 10th, is that all of us, we come from different places. I'm an immigrant from Hong Kong. I grew up in Chicago. You guys probably come from different places, but the one thing we share by virtue of being women in our industry and talking about boards is that we've had to challenge the status quo, right? We've had to think for ourselves and then act, because if we didn't, we wouldn't be here right now in this conference and in the roles that we have. And that skill in this world that we live in of increasing and unprecedented uncertainty and challenges, right? Whether it's climate change or seismic disruption in consumer behavior due to digital technologies, or it's infectious diseases as we're living in real time this year, this type of uncertainty calls for that ability to critically think and to challenge the status quo. And that's why I believe that the leaders the world needs and these companies need to navigate the uncertainties of the coming decade are sitting here in this room virtually, and why I'm so excited to spend this morning with you. So thank you.
Clara, thank you so much. And I'm really looking forward to the panel when everyone answers their questions. But we have one more lightning talk, and that is Andrea Varnado, who joins us now. Great, we see your video. Don't forget to take yourself off mute, and please take it away.
Good morning, everyone. As we get ready to go into the next part of this program, I just want to step back and say, there is a bit of irony to being at this amazing 2020 Women's on Board in this odd year of 2020. We have made significant progress in the mission of these organizations, if you've already heard this morning, but that doesn't mean that there aren't opportunities resulting from what it can teach us in each of our roles as executives, leaders, and board members. Each of the leaders before me have shared some concept of change and how they use their roles to influence that change. I'm going to hopefully spend the next 3 minutes or so sharing what your role can be, and frankly, how our feelings, how our changing diverse perspectives can influence our businesses, and maybe in more ways than you thought. So I don't think there's anyone in this virtual room who could say that something in their perspective had not changed at some point in this year. Some of you may have never thought that your teams could work remotely full time. Some of you may not have fully understood the meaning of Black Lives Matter. Some of you may have been surprised by the current election climate. But I assure you, there were many others on your teams that knew this already, got it 2 years ago, and were not surprised. Why? Because they have been feeling the impact of these decisions related to these topics for years before it came to affect you. What do I mean? Well, here's a small example. Early in the pandemic, I was in a group discussion with other leaders, and we started to talk about how we missed the socialization of the office and the happy hours and the connectedness of our teams. A conversation many of you have likely had as well. There was a general consensus until one woman, let's call her Amy, bravely stepped in and said that she felt more connected now than ever before. You see, Amy and her spouse split drop-off and pickup times with the kids. So while she was always in the office early, she had to leave at 5 every day and could never attend the happy hours. Eventually, her coworkers had just stopped inviting her. She had missed these moments of connecting with her team despite being in the office, and frankly, allowing her team and leaders to see and connect with her differently for promotions or stretch projects. For her, in this environment, she finally felt like she was on a level playing field, here at a virtual happy hour with her spouse and kids just one room over. Did your perspective just change? I can tell you it did for the group. Suddenly, the conversation became about all the things people were now able to do. They were eating healthier, spending more time with their families, working out, and how the company could keep this going. One brave perspective changed the course of an entire discussion. Now, if we peel back the onion, imagine if Amy were on the executive team or the board of your organization. How would business decisions be different? Imagine if the topic was a new product or service. What if we were suddenly talking about accessibility for those that are differently able? Suddenly you look at something you have seen so many times before and you see it with fresh eyes. Vujade, the opposite of deja vu. This is really a term, vujade. Empathy suddenly allows you to consider divergent ideas, to think in nonlinear ways, to make unexpected leaps with the goal of solving a real problem for your employees. And your employees, they're also your customers. Do you see where I'm going here? Our special, unique, challenging perspectives are a business imperative. Think about this. Addressing the frustration of social injustice and systemic racism can lead to diverse representation and improved ESG metrics. Reflection of your customers in decision-making and executive roles can lead to new products and services. Engagement with a variety of internal audiences may just stop your company from releasing a culturally insensitive advertisement, and we've seen a couple of those. The joy of promotion and talent and celebration of different cultures can lead to talent retention. But it's not personal, it's just business, right? Did your perspective just change? If you put all this together, these errant things that you might have dismissed as just feelings can create empathy in your organization. Empathy can provide perspective. Perspective leads to innovation and opportunity. So we are all here because we know that diversity is important. But you, the overachievers that you are, want to do something. While you might agree now with the value of having a woman or a person of color, if you find yourself asking what value a millennial, a non-CEO, a retail person, or a VP on your board brings to the organization, remember this. We are solving for the perspectives that can change your business and the world for the better. If those brave leaders on this panel's boards had not asked the questions for their business, we wouldn't be here today among the youngest of the public company board directors. And whether you are a current or aspiring board member, don't try to be one size fits all for the sake of being at the table. What does your story, your experience, your challenges mean for the business? And along the way, be sure to ask others for their stories too. Did your perspective just change? Vujade, my friends.
Okay, I love that. I need to write it down and vujade because I need to see how it is backwards and what it means. That's something new. I definitely just took away from that. I'm going to ask the panelists now to please, if you can, everybody turn on your cameras. Great. I see you, Clara. Andrea, keep your camera on. And Dan, let's get you back on. And hopefully, Susan, you all have gotten it back. And if not, just unmute yourself at the very least. Let's start with the number, with age. Okay, 3 of you are the youngest, among the youngest board members, and maybe the youngest person in the room when you joined the board and still are. Can we talk about how that affects what you contribute and what you've brought to the table? Clara, if you don't mind, and you can keep yourselves off mute.
Sorry, I'm dealing with my 5-year-old kind of.
That's all good. We all are.
Yeah. I think there's, every time you are the other, every intersection that you're in, it creates more friction and probably insecurity, right? So being a minority, being a woman, being young, it's like kind of a triple whammy. I think I've lived with that all my life, of course. And so that prepared me for, I think, better overcoming the imposter syndrome, which we all feel, even still after 9 years. I'd say that, it's Starbucks is really, to their credit, they recognize how important it is for the brand to stay relevant with future generations. And so I think that's why they sought me out in the first place. So credit to them. And then I have to do my part, right? I have to speak up. And I'll give you an example. Last year, we were kind of having this debate about whether to provide mobile orders, a couple of years ago, mobile order and payment and delivery, not because it's not obviously what lots of other companies and what consumers want, but because we wondered what it would do to the customer experience when we don't own every piece. And so there were obviously very talented people on the team and the operating in the management team that have been thinking about this, but the perspective I was able to provide was just, the idea of, the lazy Silicon Valley millennial who's always on the phone, right? And expect everything to come to them. And so just providing the team the support that they needed at the very top to kind of get their pilot project across the finish line, right? So those types of things, even things like, the fact that, dark wood was very, luxurious and design forward in the 90s, and that's just really not the look anymore, right? I'm not a designer, but I'm of a generation and kind of can speak to these things that really matter when you're in that consumer retail business.
That's super interesting. I never thought about that. Susan, if you want to unmute, I'm curious about you because, Clara, for her, age was an asset. It was partly why she was brought on. Susan, for you being one of the younger members, how do you feel like it was a challenge for you on your board?
Yeah, thank you. And again, sorry, I can't seem to get my video to work. So I apologize for that. I think, one of the things that I really felt very self-conscious going into this process was the fact that I was so young. And when I started interviewing for the Alaska board, I flew up to Seattle to interview, and I had just had my second child about 10 weeks, 11 weeks prior. So I'm flying up there with the whole rigmarole. In fact, I had brought the newborn so I could keep nursing because I was on parental leave, but I also brought the pumping set up. And it was, anyone who has gone through this knows you feel like you're trying to make it through the TSA with what looks like, there's this machine with wires sticking out of it. It's just totally nuts. And it was pretty crazy. And I knew that there was nothing, like, I couldn't hide that. Yes, I wasn't going to bring my newborn to the meeting, but it was, nothing was going to change how obviously young and, in kind of this very different life stage I was. And so I think it's important to just embrace that. You're not going to disguise who you are. And in fact, a couple years later at Alaska, I was pregnant with my third kid and, had a child and had the experience of being on a board as a very new mom and kind of working through all the logistical challenges. I'm pretty sure probably the first person in a long time to ask, where I can store pumping gear and all of those things, and just being upfront and transparent about that. Everyone was, I think, unbelievably warm and supportive. And then to Clara's point, how does that perspective add to the conversation? So for Alaska, for example, as they are building all of those similar to Starbucks, building their mobile app, building out digital experiences for their passengers, in addition to thinking through what those experiences need to be like, they also need to recruit people to work on them. And they're in Seattle in a competitive market with companies like Amazon and Microsoft. And one of the things that, I felt like I was able to talk through and think about the perspective of being a tech company that recruits a lot of engineers, what's important in building an engineering culture. They actually just built a new headquarters recently. And, what about the space can you build to foster more collaboration, on an engineering team? All of those things, I think, were ways in which, for me, that was a perspective that was unique and that was additive to the conversation.
That's great. So don't be self-conscious about that, and actually turn that feature of whatever it is that you bring to the table into something that offers value to your board. And Andrea, if you want to speak to that too, and I also want you to be able to expand a little bit on this idea of, and maybe you haven't experienced, but if you have, when people come to you as maybe the only African-American person, Black person on the board, and they want to ask you about Black Lives Matters or whatever, or like they come to me like I'm the only person who can talk about Asian things. How do you handle that? And what suggestions do you have to do it gracefully for people so that you're not making someone feel wrong for asking? Because I think we all want the dialogue, but it's not incumbent on you to be the expert on that subject matter.
Vicki, that's such an uncomfortable topic, but so important because I think we have to grapple with how do we touch on those topics. And so quickly, I want to echo what Clara and Susan have said about being the youngest person on the board. I've had a phenomenal experience. Age doesn't come up. Surprisingly, age comes up outside of the board with other companies. And, at some point I realized when someone asked me like, oh, by the way, how old are you? When did you graduate? I realized that's a red flag right there, because I think we can all experience, no matter what your age, lifestyle, role is, just because that is a defining factor of your demographic doesn't mean that you don't have more or less experience. That number, that role, that title doesn't define the depth of your experience. But to get to the conversation specifically around Black Lives Matter, being a woman, whatever that cut of my demographic is, I think it's important to realize that there are varying levels of comfort. And before jumping into the topic and assuming that's what someone wants to talk about, we might have all done it with the election. It's been hard not to talk about that. But it is important to say, I'd really like to talk to you about this. Are you comfortable with that? And check in. And for me personally, and I'll speak for myself here, is it's about coming from a place of authenticity. There's some people that I've never spoken to that all of a sudden want to have these conversations. And I don't know whether they have good intentions or negative intentions, or they're looking to use words and twist the situation. Some people just want to be argumentative. But I do find that if it comes from a place of, I'd really like to learn more about this. And I will say, in the comfort of this hundreds of people, there are experiences from other cultures that I don't always understand. And so while there's some that might not understand my perspective as a Black woman, I can say there are probably areas of your perspective. And so we all have these moments of discomfort of not knowing. There are conversations around natural hair in the workplace. There's conversations around social injustice. And for me, there's a lot of conversation around how do we educate in a way so that people understand and that they can build that into their own narratives as they're thinking about the future. And if you're looking for tips, it's probably helpful to maybe start it in a one-on-one conversation versus targeting it in a group discussion and making sure that person's comfortable with that.
I love that. That's a really good perspective about asking, is this something we could talk about, and doing it one-on-one. Dan, you're the only man on the panel. I do want to talk to you a little bit about two things. When you were exiting some of your board members and looking for new ones to add, did you look at women differently? Did you have a different metric by which you were measuring the women that you might want on the board versus the men? And how do you deal with criticism, or, when it comes up, is this a form of reverse discrimination? Now it's out with all the old white guys and, bringing in whoever just because of their gender or their ethnicity or what have you. So two-part question for you, Dan.
First part is very straightforward. I don't think I look at them differently. I'll be straightforward about it. It's harder to find great women candidates. I know this is such a touchy topic, and it's not that there aren't many of them. It's that people like me are afflicted with a network problem. Right? I grew up and built a network with people at a time when it was primarily white men. So when someone says to me, go find great people within your network, more of them tend to be white men. So it's easier to find great board candidates that are not diverse. But it doesn't mean, I don't think I interview or look at them differently. And we're a big proponent at DocuSign. I have been for years of what people call the Rooney Rule, which came from the NFL, which was when they started hiring coaches and they realized that none of the coaches were Black. They decided that they needed to have, if you were interviewing for a new coach, you had to have at least one candidate that was Black. And the construct is, if you have a diverse pool, you will end up solving your diversity problem because there's plenty of qualified candidates, across the different mix. And I believe it to be true. And so my model has always been to say, let's ensure we have, for senior roles, board or management, a diverse slate. And it takes sometimes a little bit more work sometimes to get the diverse candidates in there, but then it takes care of itself. In terms of the reverse issue, hey, it's a real issue. And people talk about it a lot. People don't talk about it as publicly because it feels politically incorrect, particularly if you're in the Bay Area or Seattle, where our two largest employee sets are. But my perspective on it is we should be open and be comfortable, just like this last discussion and where we have to be comfortable having those difficult conversations, and it's okay. I would not say that people at DocuSign think we brought on people into our board that have diversity of age and race and skills to lower the quality of our board members. I don't think there's anyone that would say we haven't dramatically increased the quality of our board as we've added diversity. And I think the construct is that it's not the worst thing in the world. Like the last board director we recently added was another old white guy, James Beer, incredibly capable, but I was looking for candidates. And even though the prior 3 had been diverse candidates, he was the best candidate. And so I didn't want to go out now and say, I'm not going to add a great candidate who happens to be a white male, because I think that would send the wrong message to everyone in the company that the other candidates we brought on weren't as qualified. And I think it's really important that if we don't lower the bar, we just broaden the pool. And that's kind of my view to how to solve both of those problems you articulated.
Susan, thank you, Dan. Susan, when you're on a board and you transferred from 2 very different places, right? Facebook to Alaska. Facebook, a company that was doing great, and Alaska Air right now, hit by an unforeseen worldwide pandemic. So you're at this board at one of the toughest times in the airline industry. How do you handle that and help your company navigate through that? What's been like the biggest challenge, and what do you think you've offered?
So it's a great question, and this has been really just an unforeseen and crazy year. I think the most important thing for me in both experiences has really been to focus on being sort of as open-minded as possible about the wide range of possibilities that might unfold over the course of the year, being nimble, helping both companies think through a variety of possible economic scenarios, travel scenarios. The businesses are very different, so they're impacted by the pandemic and by the various shutdowns around the country in different ways, but really lots and lots of scenario planning for, the version of the world where online advertising really changes, the version of the world where business travel, is heavily impacted for a very long time. I would say at both companies, really being nimble, adapting to new information that is coming in on the fly, looking at, how the public health landscape is really impacting the way people think, looking into the future as much as possible and thinking about, gosh, how are we going to feel about travel in 2 years and 5 years? Will business travel come back to the levels of pre-COVID? What are the ways in which we've kind of re-architected our fabric of connecting as a society? Has been really at the forefront, I think, of a lot of the conversations at both companies, even though the specific challenges have been so different. And then also, I think really a big, theme for all companies out there is how do you communicate about those challenges to your employees during a year that's really uncertain? And there's been so much impact on employees, the lives that they are frankly trying to manage. Whether or not it's a scenario where you're talking about jobs, whether it's about helping them navigate a sudden shift to a completely different style of working, whether it's about acknowledging that almost all employees are now going through a time of incredible personal challenge. Again, the parents who are managing, their jobs, who are trying to get their kids on school, on virtual school, it's so hard. And I think having those conversations with your employees, with your workforce, has been a really, really important theme at both of those companies also, and how to be really transparent about the challenges that you're facing as a company and what some of those different options are going to look like. And I think that transparency, more than anything, has been really important in terms of communicating with all of the people that we work with.
Thank you. I know that a lot of folks who are in the audience are on boards, but some are not and looking to get onto a board. So final question for each of you. If there are 2 or 3 pieces of advice that you could give to someone who wants to get on a board and become one of those pools and or candidates in those pools, what would it be? How do you get yourself noticed, and how do you get on the right board? And anyone can open that up. Andrea, how about you?
Well, especially in this environment, as we are looking to expand the boards and we talk about diversity and gender, and it's so great that we're broadening the pool. It's just important for us to really consider. I think it was Claire or Susan that introduced us to the concept of your voice and what that means. And so I'll say the quick piece of advice I have is when you look back at your experience, what are the unique things that you have done that help you to stand out? We hear about this all the time in interviewing for full-time roles, but for some reason, when it comes to boards, we tend to want to say we've done all things and everything without really getting deep into what's that unique perspective that you bring that's maybe different from other board members and that can help them really understand whether it's their talent, their product, their service, or their new opportunities. And so I think leaning into your previous roles, your unique perspective and your skill set is really important.
Yeah, just to add to those great points. So first, it's important to understand that usually, I mean, just like for any job, board roles, they have a spec, and there's certain profiles of directors that are sought after. And so there's different profiles. There could be, you know, a sitting CEO of another company, a non-competitor in the same general space. It could be, that's a common one. Another common one is the financial expert, right? The person who can serve on / chair the audit committee. So oftentimes it's a retired Big Four partner, or it's a CFO, generally of a public company. And then the one that's been fastest growing, and I think can appeal to many of you who are in this meeting, and it certainly applied to me, was the digital tech director, right? Someone who really understands through living and using these apps every day, but also building them at industry leading companies and founding companies, and being able to provide that disruption perspective onto the board. And so know which of these that you're kind of best suited for. And then once you know that, to Andrea's point, right, make sure that you stand out in that particular field, right? There's lots of people who work in digital and tech. What unique thing are you bringing, right? Susan pioneered this new model for ads. Like, what is that unique thing that's really spectacular and relevant to the market? And then how do you make sure people know about it, right? So making sure that it's you can do public speaking on it, you can blog about it, you can write op-eds for Harvard Business Review. And so I think those are the steps that kind of can come together and really help you stand out among a slate of candidates.
Dan,
Okay,
you want to
so
go? Oh, Susan, yeah, we see you. So go for it.
Sorry, I was just going to say I finally used my iPhone to try and bridge this. So sorry again for all the tech issues. I think those are great suggestions. One other thing I will say that I don't think I sufficiently appreciated until I actually began serving on the Alaska board is how deeply involved a lot of these companies and their boards are in their communities. And so I think there are a lot of civic organizations actually and nonprofits to get involved in that are a great way of expanding your network and meeting other people and becoming part of their networks. And those will be people who are already in leadership roles on boards and on management teams. And I think that's actually a kind of underrated, I think, way of really broadening your network, doing something that's worthwhile when, you know, as part of it, and forming those connections that I think are helpful as a springboard for the next step.
Dan, take us home.
I just quickly echo sort of what Julie said at the beginning as well, which is around, you have to network. Serendipity is such a huge part of how these board situations occur. And I think up until, I would say, really about 2 or 3 years ago, most people didn't assume women wanted to be on boards. It wasn't a common thing in the boardrooms where people were thinking that way. They didn't sort of think about that path. So I think the civic opportunities are great, the nonprofits, but then make sure when you're out having those interactions with people, you have to have the comfort and confidence to say, and by the way, I'm interested in for-profit or public company boards. And I think if you start getting that message out into the marketplace, you'll be surprised how the serendipity will happen. People will find, you know, the special skills that you have and that they want to have on their board. And I think the profiles is a key piece, but people need to know you are one of those profiles and you're interested.
That was so fantastic. Thank you. All of you touched on very different pieces of advice as well, all equally very valuable. Thank you to Dan, Clara, Susan. Is it Andrea or Andrea? Sorry, I have like a mental block. I feel like I've been saying it.
There's so many different versions of Andreas in the world. It's Andrea.
Andrea. And thank you to Andrea. Thank you to everyone. I'm going to hit our quick wrap up message before we send everyone off to the breakouts. I wish we could give you a big round of applause. You certainly deserve one, but just know we are doing it from our virtual spaces all over the country. All right, let's talk about the action items. Get support from your company to augment your value to them by being on a board. It does take a year of disciplined effort to get that first board seat. So be patient. It can be anywhere from 1 to 5 years to get a first board seat, depending on where you are in your career experience. So if you're not ready right now, think about the things you can do to strategize next steps in your career. You just heard fantastic advice from our panelists. Network, as Dan was saying, state your value clearly and know which position you want to go for, right? That was the point Clara was making. Learn how to ask good questions. Increase your financial acumen. Understand capital markets and take a few deep dives into cybersecurity. Those are all areas that are important right now and will continue to be. And finally, look at the annual report and plans so that you can see where this company is headed, and that will help you to align your value proposition with what that company is actually looking for on their board. So be the lever, be the change, fuel the effort. Looking forward to having everyone get into the inner circle and the boardroom. Good luck to you all. And it is now time for me to turn it over to the breakout sessions for you all to actually really connect and live the How Women Lead credo. I'm Vicki Nguyen with NBC News. It has been my honor to be your MC this morning. Thank you all. I learned a lot, and Booja Day. Bye, everyone.
Thank you, Vicki.
Y'all are very kind.
You were a complete rock star. Oh my God, thank you, community. I'm just so grateful for you, Vicki. I know this was carried in a little chaotic. I don't know if this is how it's going.